We're just okay, and we played some
Movies.
games. We're just okay.
Movie
games.
watchers.
Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Just Okay Movies. I'm your host, BIGGIESIZE, and let me say I have a newfound appreciation and respect for audio engineers and everyone in that field. I've had quite a time trying to get this episode going, so I apologize greatly for it being so late. The file got messed up during recording because of my audio equipment messing up, and then my whole rig stopped working, so I just had to go through so much. But we are having this episode, damn it. I don't like to leave you guys a week with no episode, so I'm making it happen because I love you guys. I hope you enjoy it. Just me this week. Guido's got stuff he's got to take care of, but I actually have two films I want to talk about. I'm kind of going to combine this review with two films, mainly because I feel on their own there's not enough to talk about, and these are what I would consider to be popcorn flicks. You know, films that you kind of turn your brain off a little bit and just enjoy the spectacle. I don't consider these to be offensive's the wrong word, insulting. Because that's kind of the problem when you say, oh, it's a popcorn flick, is, oh, so I need to not think about what I'm doing. Because what's going on is dumb and stupid. I wouldn't go so far to say that this is the case with these two films. But I would say going against a better film, you quickly can see the issues with it. But anyways, without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into it. The two films we're going to be talking about today are Alita, Battle Angel, and the movie Mortal Engines. So let's jump straight into Alita. This is probably the one I'm probably most excited to actually talk about. And if you enjoy sci-fi, really for both of these films, if you enjoy sci-fi worlds, you know, kind of going into a whole new world and see how that society thrives in the near or far future, both these films are wonderful in that regard. They kind of have a somewhat of a different style, but they're both surprisingly very similar in their design, in their tone. And we'll try to get into some of that stuff without going too far into it. And hear me begin to ramble on things. Alita Battle Angel is by far going to be the hardest one to talk about when it comes to story. So I'm going to do the best I can. So forgive me if things start sounding a little crazy because there's a lot going on in this film. So the gist of the film is, and we'll just do a quick synopsis of it, a robotic scientist slash, what's the word? They call him, not Monster Hunter, that's a game. Not demon hunter either. He's basically a bounty hunter. Finds this broken robot in this pile of rubble and brings her back to life. She is a robot. They kind of allude that maybe she's also partially human. That part I didn't quite catch. I think the film may have mentioned it, but I don't quite remember. He brings her back to life, and she doesn't remember who she is or where she came from or even her name, and he gives her the name Alita. The gentleman who plays as the scientist, the robotic scientist, is the guy who plays as the main German bad guy in Hateful Eight. His name escapes me. Fantastic actor. I mean, he's just super good. If you've seen any film he's been in, he's fantastic. And so he plays as kind of the father figure to Alita because she's kind of cute and innocent looking girl. Got those big Disney eyes, as Red Letter Media would call it. So you can't help but fall in love with her because she's also very naive. She's learning things again for the first time. But the only thing she can do is talk and walk around. She doesn't know about the world she's in or anything. So you're kind of along with her. And that's actually really nice because we don't know anything about this world either. This is based off of a manga and I think also an anime they made of it. So people who are fans of the series probably know more than even the film leads on, as these, you know, mostly go cut out a lot of the fluff. So I'm sure there's a lot more to this world that's not shared in the film. But as the viewer, we don't know either. So it's kind of fun to be in that position where we're learning about the world and how things go along with her. And we kind of develop that connection, like, oh, we're kind of on the same level as her, and we really feel more invested in the character. Movies do this stuff all the time. Last Starfighter is the one that comes to mind, you know, being in a completely different situation. And we learn about the world that there's basically two types of society. There's the people who live on the ground, and they're by far the lowest members of society. It's basically slums. But there's a city that lives up in the sky, and that's where the I don't know if I want to say chosen people, but the people of this society who are the most important live up there. And both societies do not interact with each other, except that the high society basically dumps all their garbage down into the lower ones, which is actually where Alita was found. So apparently she was up in that world at some point, but why she ended up in the trash, we don't know, and she doesn't know either. And we also know one other big aspect about this society, and that is the sport that they all love to watch. I think it's called Death Ball or something like that. It's a simple concept. Basically, there's a track, and all these players are on like these roller skates, and they skate around the track, and a ball like shoots out, and they chase after this ball. And it's all hell breaks loose. Like anything goes. They can kill other opponents, crash them, do anything they want. But the goal, the win, is to get the ball and put it back into the hole on the track, and you win. I don't know if maybe also killing everyone else on the track. I guess technically you still have to put the ball in the hole, but you know, if there's no one else around, then that's a really easy feat. So we know this about the society, and we also know a little bit about how it came to be this way. Apparently what happened in the past was there's a great war, and this is all that's left of humanity, or at least that we know of. So as Alita grows, she starts remembering things about her past, that apparently she was some sort of great warrior, which she the robot doctor guy reveals to her that she's a berserker, which is this lost piece of technology from the old world that like her heart and her core is able to power almost the whole city for like years. That's just how powerful it is. So she's like this truly unique piece of technology, and you kind of figure that out later because she looks a lot better than everyone else. Like all the other robots around almost feel like DIY projects. You know, they got like tubes and stuff sticking in them. They're powerful and real bulky, but they look kind of low tech, whereas she is way more sophisticated. And later on, she finds basically her suit that she's supposed to have. And that's where she starts learning even more about herself. Like they were the ones to take down the high society people, or at least one person in particular who's in high society on the little cloud planet. His name's Nova. And he's bad for reasons that we don't really know. Does this sound crazy? Like, does this sound just like a mess of ideas? It does to me. And when you're watching the film, that's probably my biggest gripe about it, is they throw so many things at you. Like, I've already left stuff out. I haven't talked about her boyfriend arc. Haven't talked about her mentor arc with whoever trained her up. Those are fairly smaller arcs, but they play a big role in the story and the narrative. And that's the film's biggest flaws. This film's like 2 hours long, and they try to fit in so much stuff that I'm sure is way more fleshed out in the manga or the anime, but they have to have it in there to make it feel complete. But it just felt like it was just thrown in at various points. Almost could have just done without it. If I'm to be honest, they should have left out the whole war part, because it is barely explained and it's a complete mess, other than to show that something big happened years, like I think they said it was like 300 years ago. So she's really old for a robot. To have that whole plot, just wipe that out. Just have it be a simple story about a guy finds a girl robot who's very advanced, and she learns that she was meant for a purpose, to take down this Nova guy, because we don't even know what Nova necessarily did wrong. At least it was not explained very well in the film. And then the reason why that's such a problem is at the very end of the film, the only way you can get up to the city is if you're the Death Ball champion. And that feels kind of thrown in the very end to kind of give purpose to maybe a sequel. And you see Nova, he's like watching the game and watching her. And then at the very end, she has this sword. She points it up to him. And he does like a little smirk, like, oh, okay, she's coming up here now. Welcome to my world, bitch, kind of thing. And she's like, I'm coming for you, Nova. But at this point, we don't really even know who the fuck Nova is or why he matters. The main bad guy in the film is this, it's actually the guy who plays as the piano player in Green Book. Fantastic actor. Really, he did a great job. But Nova can, like, take control of people. I guess certain people who accept his will or whatever. And he takes control of that Green Book guy and, like, talks through him to Alita. And that's where she's like, I'm coming for you, Nova. But you're still like, why? I don't know what you did. I don't know if you made something that was supposed to destroy the society. Maybe the whole war was your fault. After watching the film, I'm not totally sure because I'm still like, aren't you supposed to be getting ready for the death ball game? Because even that gets thrown in. The death ball thing just comes out of nowhere. You're like, oh, this is the plot now. I thought the plot was her trying to figure out who she is. And then it goes to, oh, your mentor guy, your father figure, is a bounty hunter. Now I want to be a bounty hunter. And now I want to get all the bounty hunters together. This is how this film feels. It feels like it's just too many plot points thrown together. So if there's one terrible thing I want to say about the film, it's that. The next is the acting. The acting is not very good. Everyone feels very generic, except for, I want to say his name is George Holtz, but I don't think that's right. The doctor guy, he's fantastic, and the Green Book guy's great. But everyone else, it feels like B-list acting, like almost to the level of a made-for-TV movie acting. And that's okay, because the story and the setting is just kind of interesting. If at all, if the story is just a mess, at least it's kind of interesting, even if it's a mess. So I can forgive it a little bit for at least trying to make an interesting world and interesting characters in it. Now, the positive thing I'll say about the film is Alita, the character, looks fantastic, if maybe a bit cheap and manipulative. Remember when I talked about the whole Disney-ized things that Red Letter Media like to say about Avatar? And if you don't know what that means, basically RLM says that the Disney eyes are the large, innocent-looking eyes that kind of manipulates you to think, oh, this person is what's the word? Naive and kind, having big eyes. Makes you feel more emotional, more tied to them, because it's like a little puppy dog. When a little puppy dog looks at you with its eyes, you're like, oh God, I just met you and I love you. And it's very effective. And I think that's part of the reason why we kind of cared for the blue people in Avatar, because definitely they had no personality and their story wasn't all that great, but you at least kind of felt for them because those big old eyes and their other defining features. And that's the same thing with Alita. She's this little girl who doesn't know anything, and she's got those big old eyes looking at you. So you're just manipulated by her design to care for her. And I would harp on that harder if it wasn't that it kind of worked for the story, for what we know of the story, because she starts becoming a little darker, a little more predatorial because of her, once she starts learning more about who she is. And I like that. So it works. It works better here than it did in Avatar, if you compare the two. And it also is kind of amazing that the lady playing her, they CGI'd her whole body. So she was there doing the motions and talking and stuff. The real actress, I'm not sure who she is. And then they just CGI'd everything else. And it looks pretty good. It's not too bad. If they're trying to make a very human-looking cyborg, I think they did an all right job. Other than that, it's an okay film. Still, if you enjoyed movies like Jupiter Ascending or films like that were, or probably the best one I could point to as being very similar is Speed Racer. If you saw the live-action Speed Racer and enjoyed it, go for it. I think you will find this film very entertaining in that same regard. I love the Speed Racer live action film. Thought it was so much fun. It was really nice too in Blu-ray. That was one of the first Blu-ray films I got, and when I got an HD TV, and man, the colors, all that looks so good in it. It still looks good. So even if the acting and everything's pretty bad, it looks gorgeous in high definition. Can't imagine 4K. But yeah, it's a great film. I recommend it if you're wanting a nice sci-fi popcorn flick. If I was going to give it a rating, I know we've been using the popcorn rating lately. I like it too. I give it a solid 2.5 out of 4. Very middle of the road, but I feel like that's a good rating for it. So check it out if any of that sounded interesting, that whole ramble. I feel like I've been rambling, but it's really a mess. So let's get to a film that's a little, I would say a little more straightforward, but still very fascinating. Mortal Engines. It's a film I've been really looking forward to, just because of the concept alone. Heavy CGI, probably even more than Alita. Maybe just because the design of these monstrosities, you can't really, you could do a model, but what they're doing with them probably wouldn't work with a model. So what is Mortal Engines? The main story is, in the far future, humanity wiped itself out with war using these weapons. There's some sort of like electronic imploding weapons. You get to see one later in the film. Basically, it shoots a piece of energy into a ball, and then just everything gets sucked into it, and it explodes. It shoots everything back out. It's crazy looking. Basically, the world destroyed itself with war. So the societies that were left over had to salvage the world for resources to survive, and the best way to do that was to build their cities to be mobile. And they had different names for them. The one they mentioned is the bigger cities, what they call them predator cities, just because they're so large and they eat their prey. And the biggest one right now is London. So London decides to go over, apparently there's a land bridge now that you can go from Europe into Americas, and it's on the hunt. That's kind of how the film starts. You see London pulling up, and it's pulling up to this design is so cool. It starts out with, looks like just a city, and people are like doing commerce and stuff, and it looks real crappy, like you would imagine in like a post-apocalyptic future. Everything's real run down. People have just been putting stuff together to try to make it work, like buildings, all pieces of metal and stuff like that. But then when they see London coming, they're freaking out because they know what's going to happen. The city's basically going to eat them, essentially. So the camera zooms out, and all these buildings and stuff are built on these tanks. They just scatter. It's so cool. So it's just like anywhere, as long as there's enough room, you can put all these seeds together, do commerce, and then they disperse. That's such a cool idea. But anyways, London's coming, and it's going to eat those up because their problem is they need resources to power their city. It's this, I mean, it still looks very post-apocalyptic, but compared to the others, it's like a paradise. And it's just so cool. Like, that whole concept is so interesting compared to everything else you could imagine. Post-apocalyptic, future societies, they're all on wheels because they have to keep salvaging to survive. So our story revolves around a London person who gets betrayed by one of their leaders, and a girl whose mother was killed by that same leader. So basically in London, there's a power struggle between kind of still doing the hunt thing, keep rolling around, or there's another guy the guy who betrayed the one guy and killed the mother of the main girl, who believes they should go to war with the biggest motherfuckers on the continent, but no one has ever won against them. It's this Asian society. They're protected by a dam, and it's so cool at the very end because this dam has like guns galore on it when London finally tries to take them down. So you have this battle of ideologies, but the main bad guy, he's got a secret weapon to take down that wall, and that's the big mystery of the film is, what is he building? Hidden in a tower, and for some reason the other guy, the old school guy, doesn't want to go see it. That part's kind of weird. But anyways, throughout the film, you're following the British guy who gets kicked out, and the girl who's on going out for revenge to take down the the guy who's building something. This one's a little complicated too, so I'm going to do my best to explain what's going on. So what we find out later is the main bad guy, who's actually played by the actor who played Agent Smith. Really good. He did a great job. He has one of these energy weapons, and he's going to use it against that society. And that society, you kind of wonder if maybe they're just as bad as the main bad guy, but no, they're very peaceful. They're accepting. They want people to come in and join them because they got to all stick together. And at the very end, the girl finally gets her revenge against him. They stop the doomsday weapon, and everything's great. Oh man, that's basically the synopsis of the film. I've got to say, it's very enjoyable. I had a lot of fun watching it. The cities look so interesting. We kind of talked about that during the synopsis. They range from looking like completely shitty to really fascinating. But then seeing them fight and run from each other, it's just so neat. The setting is more interesting than the story itself. I kind of was boring myself talking about this story. But it's just that world that they built is really cool. And I don't really... Oh, I do have one thing I want to talk about that really pissed me off. This film's made by Universal, and one of the really cool aspects of this movie is in London, our British guy who gets kicked out, he's a historian. And that was fascinating because they have this archive of all these old things that they find while roaming around the earth for resources. And you go into their archive area and they have all these like toasters and TVs. They even show like iPhones. They have this case that they call the screen age. And it's like an old TV, an iPhone, a computer. That's just so neat. Like, look at these characters looking at stuff that we use now and how they're interacting with it. But they don't really play that up enough. I kind of wish they did it a bit more. But one part in particular, they hit like a bump or something, and they're like, quick, secure the old gods' relics. And they look and you go over, and it's 2 minion statues. Minions like from the Minion movie and all that stuff. And that was just so fucking lame because you could just imagine some bigwig at Universal saying, we gotta have the minions in this movie. This movie where they don't belong at all. We gotta have 2 stupid ass looking statues of the minions and call them the old gods. Man, how lame is that? That almost made me not want to watch the film, and that's early on. Why? Why would you do that? But anyways, at least it's a small cut, but it's just so fucking lame. And I can't believe Peter Jackson allowed that. I hope that wasn't his idea. I can imagine Universal wanted to do that as a joke, and it wasn't funny. It was kind of lame. But everything else about the film, not bad. The acting, meh. Still, we're thinking popcorn level. That's where it was. But it's the world, the sense of adventure, because they're having to go around to figure out a plan to take down London, especially when they figure out there's a weapon there. So it's kind of that fun scheme. Because these people are they don't really have any power, so they got to use their wit to outsmart the more powerful enemy. And all the little cool locations, all the places on the ground are really neat. It's really cool when they're having to like go through the world without a vehicle because it just feels so big. Because just everything got wiped out, so it's just so much land around. So that's pretty cool. There's also like these sky cities that you can only get to if you got a plane, and that's kind of neat too, as a safe haven from the big what they call them, predator cities down below. They can get to the sky. All that stuff is kind of cool. I would almost say a good comparison would be Waterworld, and I know Waterworld is it's a fine movie. It was. What's the word am I looking for? It was panned and memed to oblivion, really just because it cost too much to make, and it flopped because no one cared about that film. The film itself is fine. It's just fine. So it's more of the situations around the film dictated everyone's thought of the movie. And you could almost say the same thing about Mortal Engines, because it flopped in theaters as well, just not spectacularly, because no one even remembers it. I forgot about it until I saw a little thing online for it. I'm like, I want to watch that. So if you liked Waterworld, that's a terrible comparison. That's a bad way of starting a pitch to your film. If you liked Waterworld, then you will probably love Mortal Engines. And if anything I talked about has you at least slightly interested, I would recommend watching it. Fun, interesting take on a post-apocalyptic film. And hey, if you want to share your thoughts on these films or any other film, shoot me an email at justokmovies@gmail.com. Also, send us a tweet at justokmovies. I'd love to hear your thoughts. I guess to wrap up, Oscars happened this Sunday. Guido and I were pretty much saying Roma's going to win, and I think our opinions haven't changed on that. That's the one that's going to win. I'll be shocked if it's any of the other ones. And I think we just got kind of tired of talking about the Oscar films. We plan on doing 2 every week, but honestly, we're like, none of these films are really that great, and we're just tired of talking about them. The next one we were supposed to talk about was Vice. I guess I'll talk about it for a moment. Basically, if you've seen the Big Short, that's what it's called. It's the same director, it's the same style. Vice is the same as that one. And I think it's actually better than The Big Short, because it annoyed me quite a bit, because it felt a bit too smirky, a bit too pretentious and clever than it really was. Like, you could just feel them thinking, oh, we're so clever by having Margaret Robbie in a bathtub talking about how mortgage payments work. Like, it's like, God, and they did it over and over and over. So lame, and it took you out of the story. Vice luckily doesn't do that too much, although there's one scene in particular that really pissed me off. So what happens is Dick Cheney, if you don't know, Vice is about Dick Cheney, where he started and kind of how he came to be the vice president and some stuff afterwards. This part of the film, George W. Bush, has asked him to be his running mate, and he's kind of considering it, but he's not sure if he wants to do it. So then they do a scene where he's in bed with his wife, and he's trying to decide with her, am I going to do this? And then the narrator, throughout the whole film, there's a narrator. He says, we don't know exactly what happened here, what was said to make him decide to do it, but it definitely wasn't done like a Shakespearean play. And after he says that, they basically do the scene as if it was a Shakespearean play. And it made me so mad, because it was that same feeling of, okay, I'm really invested in this film. I really want to see what their interpretation is of it. Why the fuck are we doing it in Old English now? Like, so overdone. You know, that whole, like, to which would you decide to conquer the world? You know, that whole kind of thing going on for like 5 minutes, and it's so sad. That part alone made me want to stop watching the film, because I feel like it's not, hey, we're doing this scene and we really hope it really captures your attention. It really wins you on the emotional level, the intellectual level. This is just, I want to be kind of, what's the word? Clever? I want to be clever. I want the audience to think this film I'm making is very clever and interesting, because that's me as a director. It screams desperation, and I hate it. Because the story is very interesting on its own. You don't need those things to make it more interesting than it already is. At least with The Big Short, they were trying to explain some fairly complex financial situations and tactics and things like that. But this wasn't helping me at all understand. You're just taking the piss. Other than that, oh, and one other scene where they kind of do a fake out, but it's the lamest fake out I've ever seen in my life. After he leaves the government, they say, he goes and becomes the CEO of Halliburton, and they're like, and he raised his kids and was happily ever after living at his home somewhere. And then they start rolling the credits, and it's lame. How is this film getting nominated for an Oscar? It's disgusting. But go watch it. It's actually very interesting. I don't know factually how interesting it is. It's definitely anti Dick Cheney and a bit anti Bush, as anti the Republican era of that time. But I will say they did a really good job at the end. Dick Cheney breaks the fourth wall, and Dick Cheney's played by Christian Bale, who's a fantastic actor. Fantastic. I had no idea that was Christian Bale unless Guido told me, because I saw trailers for it. I had no idea that was him. He's a phenomenal actor. He looks at the camera and basically says, I do not apologize for anything I did so that you could sleep at night and enjoy your family. Everything I did was for that. It says it much better than that, but that's the gist of it. And I found that to be kind of interesting, because I felt like, first of all, that's something Dick Cheney would say. I feel that way. But also, I think it kind of made you think for just a second that maybe he's right. Maybe that was the only way to make sure I could sleep at home at night and not worry about another terrorist attack or anything like that. Not to say that that's the case, that's for you to make mind about it, but I found it to be a really nice touch. And if there was any point that they should break a fourth wall or have some sort of tangent, that was the time to do it. Not some shitty ass Shakespearean part during a bedroom scene where it was completely unwarranted. Or a fucking fake out. Like, God, so lame. But go check it out. It was actually pretty interesting. I recommend it. Well, anyways, guys, thank you all so much for listening. I hope you've enjoyed this episode. I'm a bit flustered from everything I've had to deal with, so I may not have done the best I could have done, but I appreciate you all listening regardless, and we will be back with possibly another review or maybe just a discussion episode next week. We'll find out together, I guess. You all take care. Have a great evening.